You know that moment when someone casually asks how much you've got saved for retirement, and instead of answering, you laugh a little too hard and change the subject? That nervous laugh that's really just panic wearing a disguise? Here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people have no idea whether they're actually behind, ahead, or perfectly normal. They're just guessing, and usually guessing wrong in the worst direction. So today, we're fixing that. We're walking through exactly how much the average American has saved at 30, 40, 50, and 60, using real 2026 data. And by the end, you'll know precisely where you stand and what that number actually means. My name is Nick, and I spend an unreasonable amount of time digging through financial data, so you don't have to. If you want more honest breakdowns like this, instead of vague, motivational nonsense, subscribe. And if this helps you see your own numbers more clearly, drop a like. Before the actual figures, you need to understand something. Almost every article on this topic gets wrong. There are two very different numbers hiding inside every age bracket: the average and the median. The average gets dragged upward by a small number of extremely wealthy households. The median is the person standing exactly in the middle of the line. If you remember one number from this video, remember the median, because that's the one that reflects a normal life. Let's start at 30, where the anxiety usually begins. According to the Federal Reserve's most recent survey of consumer finances, median retirement savings for households under 35 sits at roughly $18,880. The average is meaningfully higher, pulled up by a handful of high earners, but the median is the one that matters, and it should actually make you feel better, not worse. If you're 30 with 5 figures saved, or less, you are not the outlier you think you are. You're statistically normal. Roughly 1 in 4 Americans has no retirement savings at all at this stage. So simply having something already puts you ahead of a meaningful chunk of your peers. The common advice is that you should have your full annual salary saved by 30. In practice, almost nobody hits that, and the people telling you otherwise are usually selling you something. Here's why 30 matters so much anyway, even with a small balance. This is the decade where time does almost all the heavy lifting, and most people don't realize it because the dollar amounts feel too small to take seriously. Picture 2 people. One starts investing $300 a month at 25, the other waits until 35, but throws in $500 a month to catch up. By 65, assuming a steady long-term market return, the person who started at 25 usually ends up with more money despite contributing less overall. That 10-year head start is worth more than almost any amount of extra hustle later. Now let's jump to 40, where the comparison game gets genuinely brutal. Median retirement savings for the 35 to 44 range comes in around $60,000, according to the same Federal Reserve data. The average is dramatically higher, often reported above $130,000, again skewed by a relatively small slice of high net worth household. If you're 40 with tens of thousands saved, you're squarely in the middle of the pack, not falling behind some invisible curve. This is usually the decade where life throws the most expensive curveballs all at once. Kids, a bigger mortgage, aging parents who suddenly need help, a career pivot that didn't pan out. 40 isn't a finish line where you're supposed to have it all figured out. It's typically the messiest, most expensive stretch of the whole journey, and the data reflects that. The good news is 40 still leaves roughly 25 years before a typical retirement age, which is still an enormous runway. By 50, the picture separates more sharply between people who started early and people who didn't. Median retirement savings for the 45 to 54 bracket lands around $87,000, while the average climbs north of $300,000, again heavily influenced by the upper end of the wealth distribution. This is the decade where the gap between savers and non-savers becomes impossible to ignore. It's also the decade where the tax code hands you tools nobody talks about enough. Once you hit 50, you unlock catch-up contributions designed to help people accelerate during their highest earning years. In 2026, that's an extra $8,000 you can stuff into a 401k beyond the normal limit, and an extra $1,100 into an IRA. Most people don't even know this exists, let alone use it. If 50 arrives and your number feels embarrassingly small, this is genuinely your last major acceleration window, and it's worth taking seriously instead of quietly panicking in private. Now we arrive at 60, the age where the numbers finally start resembling real retirement security, at least for some. Median retirement savings for the 55 to 64 bracket comes in around $185,000, with the average sitting well above $500,000. This is also the age where the gap between prepared and unprepared becomes almost violently visible. A meaningful share have built something substantial, often several $100,000 or more, while a separate, larger group still has close to nothing. There isn't really a smooth middle ground by 60, the way there was at 30. You either built momentum somewhere along the way, or the leaks in your finances never got patched, and the difference compounds into a massive split by this point. So why does the gap between average and median grow wider every single decade? At 30, it's a few $1,000s. By 60, it stretches into the hundreds of thousands. This isn't random. It's compounding working exactly as it's supposed to, except it's compounding the gap between people who started early and people who didn't, just as relentlessly as it compounds anyone's personal savings. The people pulling the average upward at 60 aren't necessarily smarter or luckier. In the overwhelming majority of cases, they simply started decades earlier and let time do what time does. Every year you wait isn't just a missed year of contributions. It's a missed year of compounding on top of compounding, and those years stack into something nearly impossible to fully claw back later. There's something else buried in this data that almost nobody mentions. The jump in median savings between each decade isn't linear, it's accelerating. From 30 to 40, the median roughly triples. From 40 to 50, it grows again, but at a slower relative pace. From 50 to 60, it more than doubles again. This isn't because people suddenly earn dramatically more in their 50s. It's because the money already sitting there from decades earlier finally has enough mass to start generating serious returns on its own. The exact mechanism that turns a slow first decade into a much faster fifth one. By your 50s, a huge percentage of your growth is coming from money that's simply been compounding quietly in the background for 20 or 30 years. Now, the elephant in the room. If you've been doing quick math in your head, you've probably noticed something uncomfortable. Even the average 60-year-old's balance, north of $500,000, doesn't fully cover what financial planners say you need for a comfortable multi-decade retirement. The number people commonly cite as their personal target in 2026 surveys is well over $1 million. That gap between what people have and what they say they need is real, and pretending otherwise wouldn't help anybody watching this. But here's context that makes it less terrifying. These figures don't include Social Security, which still provides meaningful income for most retirees. They don't include home equity for people who've paid down a mortgage over 30 years, and they don't include pensions for the shrinking but still significant number of workers who have one. The full retirement picture is bigger and messier than any single number on a 401k statement. And treating that one number as the entire verdict on your future is a mistake almost everyone makes at some point. So where does this leave you, depending on which decade you're standing in right now? In your 20s or 30s? Start now, even small, because time is doing math for you right now that no amount of money thrown in later can fully replicate. In your 40s, stop comparing yourself to some imaginary peer who has it all figured out, because the median data shows most of them don't, and instead focus on whatever increase you can realistically make to your contribution rate this year. In your 50s, take catch-up contributions seriously, because a tax code is handing you a tool most people leave on the table out of pure unawareness. And approaching 60, the conversation shifts from purely accumulating to figuring out how your number, Social Security, and any other assets fit together into something that funds the life you actually want. Here's what I want you to walk away with more than any specific dollar figure. These benchmarks aren't a verdict on your worth as a person, and they're definitely not a scoreboard you're supposed to be winning against your neighbors. They're simply a mirror, a way to see clearly where you actually stand instead of guessing in the dark and assuming the worst. Whatever number you saw yourself in today, the only thing that actually matters going forward is the next decision you make, not the decade of decisions you can't undo. Pull up your account today, find your real number, compare it honestly to where you are in this breakdown, and then do exactly one thing this week to nudge it in the right direction. Future you isn't asking for perfection. They're just asking you to start paying attention now.